Fright Night Vault. Audio horror for nighttime listening.
Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Night falls on a tower of concrete and neglect. Corridors long as coffins, stairwells that breathe cold air like old lungs. Elevators sleep broken. The wind finds its way through cracked panes and whistles down a spine of darkened hallways. Doors are thin, walls are thinner. Between apartments, the building keeps a second set of rooms, narrow gulfs of pipe and vent, a hollow anatomy no one is meant to see. Inside one unit, a small bathroom glows with the weak light of a bare bulb. The mirror hums faintly, fogged by the day's last shower. This is the kind of place where you learn to live with noises. Neighbors arguing, radios bleeding through plaster, footsteps above like slow rain. You tell yourself it's nothing. That's how people survive here, by naming the unnameable as ordinary. But some sounds do not belong to ordinary. Tonight there is a rattle that does not come from the pipes, a careful scrape as if something metal is being lifted from its cradle, a breath from a void that should not breathe. The mirror trembles in its frame. It is only glass, and the glass is only a lid. The phone is lifted. A voice tries to make fear sound reasonable. Help is requested, then begged. The voice on the other end cannot hear the hollow inside the walls or the hush that follows when you press your ear to the mirror and someone on the other side presses back. The call ends with promises and protocol. Promises do not turn locks. Beyond the bathroom is a narrow bedroom, a table with a half-finished meal, a window that stares into another block of the same windows, the same lights dying one by one. Somewhere below, a siren threads the streets, too far away to matter. Somewhere above, a door slams, and the building shudders like an animal trying to shake off flies. The scrape returns, louder, deliberate. The mirror quivers as if it is not mounted to the wall but to a hinge. The light flickers. The apartment breathes out and will not breathe in. This is a place where people learn the cruel math of attention, what is answered and what is ignored, where fear travels faster than help, where a bad design becomes a weapon, and the spaces behind your reflection become corridors for hands that are not yours. When the knocking starts, it does not come from the hallway. It comes from the other side of the glass. And still, nothing in the city stops. Laughter rises from the courtyard 3 floors down. A purse zips, a baby cries and is soothed. Somewhere, a television preacher asks for faith from people who have already given theirs to locks and luck. The apartment waits, small and brave and alone, listening to its own death approaching through a thin, shining door. Before legends wear hooks and stories grow teeth, there is always a moment like this. Quiet, exact, recorded only by the room that had to hear it. A breath, a hinge, a whisper traveling through a building's bones. The mirror shivers again. The days after blur into a kind of silence, but not the silence of peace. This is the silence of indifference, the kind that buries fear beneath bureaucracy. The woman had called. She had reported the sound of intrusion, the shaking of her mirror. A stranger's voice behind the wall. She had begged them to come, to check, to see. The police wrote it down. They promised to send someone. Hours passed. The door was never knocked, the apartment never entered. Promises dissolved like mist in the night. It wasn't until neighbors heard the cries, heard the breaking of the calm, the shouts muffled through thin walls, that they realized the story had changed. By then, the building was already a tomb. When authorities did arrive, too late to prevent, they found the evidence of violation. The mirror frame loosened, the void behind it pried open. The bathroom cabinet was not simply a fixture, but a passage, a design flaw that had turned every medicine shelf into a doorway. A secret artery through the project, one that connected strangers to your most private room. The apartment told the rest of the story without words, the signs of struggle, the ransacked space, the stillness that could only mean one thing. The city took note, but only for a moment. A headline here, a broadcast there, a few voices crying out about design, about poverty, about the cages people were forced to live in. But the voice of the victim faded beneath the louder hum of the city, and soon the story of a woman's death became just another statistic in a place already heavy with them. Yet the building remembered, the neighbors remembered, and more importantly, the mythmakers remembered. Because there is something uniquely horrifying about the idea that your mirror, the one thing reflecting your own face back to you, might also be the door through which death enters. It is the kind of story that refuses to stay buried, the kind that waits for someone to pick it up, sharpen it into legend, and carry it far beyond the project's walls. The tragedy could have ended as just another forgotten crime in a city that too often turned its back on its poorest residents. But stories like this do not remain confined to their walls. They leak outward, like blood through plaster. The image was too haunting to ignore, a mirror that swings open like a door, a voice that creeps through the pipes, a death that no one came in time to stop. Fear thrives on images like these because they speak to something primal, the violation of the most private space, the place where you are supposed to be safest. Word spread beyond Cabrini-Green. Whispers turned into reports, reports into folklore. Parents warned their children, don't trust the walls, don't turn out the lights, don't stare too long into the mirror. What had happened once became a symbol, and symbols become myths. And myths are hungry. When filmmakers came searching for horror, they didn't need to invent one from whole cloth. They only needed to look at what had already happened. They found it here in the hollowed-out heart of Chicago's neglected projects, in the death of a woman whose warnings were ignored until it was too late. They took the blueprint of her terror and laid something darker over it. From the real came the supernatural. From the design flaw came the mirror curse. From a murder came a myth. And that myth was given a name, a face, and a weapon. A hook to rend flesh, bees to swarm the air, a ghost made from the ashes of racial violence and historical cruelty. He was not born in Cabrini-Green, but it became his lair. He was not the killer of one woman, but of countless victims whispered about in playgrounds and alleys. The Candyman. Now the fear was no longer just of what was. It was of what could be, a legend that said, if you dare to summon him, if you stand before the glass and repeat his name, the same fate might crawl out to claim you. The real horror had birthed something larger, a legend with teeth sharp enough to pierce generations. The mirror trembles no more, the apartment is empty, but the story remains, whispered in every retelling. Parents in Chicago remembered. Families across the country grew uneasy. What began as a single crime now lived on as a shadow greater than itself. And then, cinema claimed it. In 1992, the legend was given flesh. The Candyman appeared on screen, a towering figure draped in a dark coat, bees swarming from his chest, a rusted hook glinting in the light. A killer born of injustice, hatred, and vengeance. Fiction, yes, but fiction fed by something real. Because before the hook, before the bees, before the whispered dares in front of the mirror, there was a woman whose cries for help went unanswered. This was the fate of Ruthie Mae McCoy, murdered in April 1987 inside her Cabrini-Green apartment after calling police to say someone was entering through her bathroom cabinet. She was right. The flawed design of those walls became the doorway through which her killers came. Her story was buried in headlines and then carried into legend. The film's director, Bernard Rose, admitted to weaving her tragedy with Clive Barker's short story, The Forbidden, fusing real-life violence with myth. In the movie, a graduate student investigates the urban legend of the Candyman, a ghostly figure haunting Cabrini-Green. In reality, it was Ruthie's death that gave the myth its teeth. The Candyman films became horror classics, but behind the buzzing bees and the hook was a truth more terrifying than any fiction. A woman begged for help, and no one came. The story you just heard is no invention. You can look it up. The crime was the murder of Ruthie Mae McCoy in Cabrini-Green, 1987. And from her death came the inspiration for the 1992 horror classic, Candyman. Behind every legend lies a truth, and behind every reflection something may be waiting to step through. Subscribe to The Vault and never walk alone again. We upload daily, and remember, some mirrors should never be touched. See you on the next video.